In recent days, some believe that compromise has turned into a dirty word in Washington. Historian Kenneth C. Davis is the author of the Don't Know Much About series. His most recent work is titled Don't Know Much About the American Presidents. Good morning to you, Kenneth C. Davis.
Good morning. Always a pleasure.
Just in the Toyota Green Room, you just said to us we wouldn't be here without compromise. What did you mean by that?
Of course. A little over 220 years ago, in fact, last week was Constitution Day. Men got together in secret in a hot room in Pennsylvania, no air conditioning, of course, windows closed, doors locked, and they made compromises. Those compromises created the Constitution. We wouldn't be here as a country without that. Washington, D.C. as a city wouldn't exist without a compromise between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, who did not like each other, but they got together and agreed on something that created the real estate deal that created Washington, D.C., so that Alexander Hamilton could get his financial plan passed.
What other good examples of a failure to compromise in U.S. history?
Well, the greatest and most tragic, of course, is 150 years ago. As the country is working towards a civil war, we could not find a way to politically resolve the questions of slavery. And it was a political and a social and an economic question, more than a moral question. And of course, that killed off 2% of the American population. That's the most tragic failure to compromise in our history. Not all compromises are good, of course. We go back to the Constitution. One of those compromises said that slaves would be counted in the Constitution as 3/5 of a person.
I hate that rule.
Well, without it,
Yeah.
Georgia and South Carolina and North Carolina would have walked out of the Constitutional Convention. So do you take that compromise and have a constitution, or do you walk away from it and the country never exists? That was the question they faced back then. It was not an easy compromise. People said it was a compromise with the devil for a long time.
We're now in this situation, obviously, in Washington, where no one seems willing to compromise. I mean, do you think something is actually different now, or that once again we'll work our way through this?
Well, the long course of history says we'll find a way to work our way through this. As I mentioned, the Civil War was the worst case of the failure to compromise, and it cost 2% of the American population. Between 600 and 800,000 people died. We had other times in our past where people refused to compromise over things like desegregation. And it slowly but surely eventually happened.
What about the language that's being used? I mean, the Democrats say Republicans are acting like terrorists, arsonists, people with bombs strapped to their chests. There's comparisons to Nazis. This is, you know, Republicans accusing Democrats of killing women, killing children, killing senior citizens. I mean, really acerbic language.
Nothing new about that. Politics in America has always been nasty, mean. Thomas Jefferson was called an atheist. He was called, and which was a terrible word at that time. He was called a Jacobin, which was like being called a left-wing terrorist at the time. He was accused, of course, of sleeping with a slave. That wasn't something a historian came up with 100 years later. That was a campaign charge in 1804. So politics has always been mean and nasty, but we still find a way around it.
Ken Davis, thank you.